Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Well, here we are again, and what a week it has been. And we're going to drive straight into speaking to Jonathan, because he's going to be a lawyer person and go off and do some serious work, or the school run, one or the other. I don't know which it is. It's one. He told me it's important, but it probably isn't. It's probably shopping. But Jonathan, you've got a great article on your website. I'll put the link in below about drone sightings, FAA reports. Perhaps you would care to unpack that a little bit for us.
Sure. Yeah, the FAA has been releasing information slowly on the drone sightings that they have been collecting. And so kind of that has been coming out. I've been compiling it all into a large Excel spreadsheet and then went through and analyzed it. And so it was interesting to note how the actual data in some instances was different than what the FAA was actually estimating or reporting. And you know, even echoing what some of the points I brought up in this drone sightings article, the Government Accountability Office in May of 2018 actually kind of accurately, as I would think, summed up the situation. They said, and I quote, FAA told us that most of the reports cannot be verified because of small UAS, typically that they are not actually detected by radar. The small UAS pilot is usually not identified, or the small UAS or other physical evidence is not recovered. FAA and some aviation industry stakeholders also told us that the reliability of many of the reports is questionable. FAA explained that this is because pilots can have difficulty positively identifying objects as small as UAS, given their small size, their distance from the observed position, the speeds of which the manned aircraft and a UAS are operating, or the various factors competing for the pilot's attention. So it's not just me that's saying this. There are other individuals, you know, even the FAA, the information is highly suspect, which is, I think, very unfortunate, because this information is actually being relied upon by individuals, like industry as well as government officials, in making the basis for decisions going forward. And so it's really bad data, and it's unfortunate. It's I think going to have a negative impact on the drone industry. And the Government Accountability Report actually brought this up, is that since it's bad data, and this data is being used to, if you will, inform the FAA's safety risk assessments of the national airspace, in essence, their safety risk assessments are inaccurate because of the bad data that they have put out. And whether or not, you know, that's intentional or not, some people kind of might just say they're putting it all into one thing. And it's just like, guys, well, you guys are very intelligent when it comes to doing, you know, building aircraft and making sure that that they're actually built correctly and coming up with standards. And then you put out this information that is just so unverifiable and bad, that it does actually, really, there should be the presumption going along with it that it's primarily politically motivated, especially since that the announcements that you see in the FAA, especially under the Huerta administration, that they were, if you will, timed at certain times during the fall with conferences announcing these drone sightings and stuff on the rise. But you never hear about these drone sightings on the decline when it's in colder periods, right? You don't hear these alarming statistics when it's around, you know, March, April, May, June, because the previous, you know, 6 months had been low numbers. But you will hear the announcements sometime, you know, October, November, December, when we're on an uptick. And because it's just it's like a sine wave showing a slow, steady growth over time. And when you kind of see that, it's like, well, we shouldn't really be drastically alarmed, and we should be very careful to point out to people that, like, I think it was a Bloomberg, I believe, one of the reporters over there, he uses inflammatory language such as, you know, drone sightings surge. And it's like, yeah, well, if you look back over a couple month period, yeah, I could see it like surging. But you look at over a year, you know, year over year setup, you go, it's actually not that surging.
So come on, you have to give notice that if it goes from 1 to 2, it surges 100%. So that's surging. It really depends on how do you consider surging.
Well, right, but then they don't report like couple months later when it's falling, right? You don't see the same reporter 6 months later going like, drone sightings are just going through the floor. It's just dropping. It's like the FAA's regulations have completely remedied the entire situation. I mean, we're now half of where we were 6 months ago, right? You don't see that. You see the opposite, like 200%, we're all going to die.
Well, I see you've written the articles. 200%, we're all going to die. Well done. So what are we going to say next year? 400%. Good day, chat. Thank you very much for joining us. But at what point then? There must be a grown-up somewhere in the world that knows. At what point does data that you publish that is found to be useless have to be thrown away? Surely, if it is that bad, you can't. The FAA potentially spending a lot of money on the back of these reports, on their mitigating measures, and what if they don't need to? Surely, in all surveys, there must be a point where you say, "Oh, this data is rubbish. Best we don't do anything on it." Anyone got any ideas about that? No.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of interesting info in there. And I mean, one that we've seen at least the FAA now use it in an inflammatory manner, and as well as news agencies. So that's been, at least documented. What you can use actually from it, if you look through all the data, there's an overall trend that develops that there are more drone sightings where it's warmer and there's more people. So I know you're probably like, well, that makes sense. And it's like, well, that's about the only useful piece of info I could pull from all of this. But, if you are at least maybe from a pilot's perspective, how could you use this information? I would say that as part of your pre-flight planning, if you're planning on flying below 400 feet in a warm environment, where it's heavily populated, where you think that the people might be flying their drones to get nice scenic pictures, also known as the beach in South Florida, or, down in LA and stuff like that, right? Then you might be more at risk for encountering a drone versus flying above 400 feet or potentially flying in December or flying in Minnesota or middle of nowhere, Wyoming, right?
Middle of nowhere, Wyoming, home to things, I'm sure. Yeah, but it's very annoying, isn't it? Then, so shouldn't the industry then be pointing out just what nonsense this data is and underlining it, even especially if the FAA themselves are saying it's nonsense?
What industry, Gary? Who is
yes, what industry? Oh, yes, you're right. Yes. Oh, yes,
well,
that's true.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the Academy Model Aeronautics posted some breakdown of what they went through, and then as well of the data, and also I believe the unmanned aircraft safety team also analyzed the data as well. So it's not just me and the Government Accountability Office; it's also the UAST as well as the AMA have all pointed out that there are some problems with this data.
Okay. Well, I wonder where. Well, I mean, I wanted to ask you something else. I know you've got to go, Jonathan. Does anyone else have anything for Jonathan on that particular subject? Bruce, it's your sort of a thing.
No, I know it seems to be endemic around the world, because here in New Zealand, the CAA also fudged the figures, and their reports were analysed by independent parties, and they also found that there was a lot of flaws in the reporting. There was a lot of stuff counted twice, and CAA actually had to publish a correction to their figures because they were massively less than the claims they'd made. So it looks like the regulators are trying to put a case for more power to them and more regulation, more control, without the evidence to back it up. And Jonathan has found the same thing with the FAA. I would be not surprised if it's the same all over the world. It's just endemic to the machine that is the regulatory authority.
Like Bruce says, for instance, here, now that we got the new law coming out, and before it is duly regulated with all the mandatory insurances, there was a report that we had 16 cases of sightings during the last year, of which only 2 were investigated and prosecuted. So, and it's curious to see that, okay, we had the period before the new law, then the new law came out. It's already applicable, but it's not fully applicable because there are no insurances and no registration site yet. But before that comes up, we already have some of these reports, 16 sightings of which 15 by civilian pilots, 1 by a military plane, and all at heights of 500, 600 meters above ground, so clearly in violation of any decent and reasonable drone pilot that can fly it. So that's the way they're trying to sell now insurances.
Perhaps so. Yeah, perhaps so. Now, Jonathan, just before we started, we mentioned recurrent training, because in Part 107 land, a lot of people are coming up to 2 years, 24 months of having their tickets. And you mentioned you've actually got, I didn't say talk about it, but you've got a product to help people with that recurrent training. And also you were mentioning aeronautical knowledge. Perhaps you could explain that again to me again.
Sure. So under Part 107, when you go and get your remote pilot certificate, your certificate is indefinite unless, you know, you die, and there's certain things that you can lose it, but it's pretty rare. You have it, but what expires is your aeronautical knowledge currency. Your certificate doesn't expire. It's your knowledge. And so every 24 months, you have to, you have one of 3 ways of going and showing that you still have aeronautical knowledge. You can be a Part 61 pilot, that non-sport pilot, non-student pilot. You can be sport or higher, and you have your biannual flight review. You can use all of that as well as an online training course to show currency. Another method is that you can do an initial knowledge test or a recurrent knowledge test. The difference in the percentages is that the recurrent test, it doesn't have all the things on it that the sections that the initial did. Like the initial had questions regarding weather, while the recurrent does not. But since it doesn't have the weather, it's much more heavily focused on regulations as well as reading charts and airspace. I believe charts, airspace, and regulations, that just makes up right there about 60% of the exam, just right there. So it's something you need to pay attention to. So every 24 months, you need to do one of those 3 things. And what's kind of problematic, and bring this up, is that the FAA issued the remote pilot certificates without any type of expiration date on them. So people are going to be operating under them, I think maybe unintentionally, right? But there might also be people that are shady, trying to save $150 from taking the recurrent or initial knowledge exam, and are just going to say, hey, I have my remote pilot certificate. If you're maybe a police officer that's stopping somebody, or you're a company that's vetting somebody, you're going to want to ask that individual for the remote pilot certificate as well as their most recent knowledge exam test report, and see if that was done within the last 24 months. And so if you're also a professional operator, what you should do is keep, along with your remote pilot certificate, a copy of your most recent knowledge test report, so that you could show that to someone if they've been paying attention to what I'm saying here on the show, in case you get stopped by an officer that's smart enough to ask for that. So that's one thing there. And then I did have a large study guide that I did put out on my website specifically for that, because I originally, remember way back when, put out that free study guide for the initial. Well, I put out one for the recurrent, a free one, but then I've also been working on recently here a training course specifically on Part 107.
And funny enough, just in the comments, Richard says he passes 107 on September the 1st, 2016. So is it true that it is still valid until the end of September?
Yeah, it's until the last day of the month. So if you really want to do it, like if you wanted to get like a hack and save yourself a little bit more, or give yourself a little bit more time, take it on the 1st of a month with 31 days or something like that. So that's one trick, right? So take it on like September 1st or something like that, October 1st. That way you got 24, and then it carries over to the rest of the end of that month. That's one thing you could do. Additionally, it doesn't give you any limits on like how early you can take it. So what I would suggest for some people is that everyone went out and did it in August. Well, August is still business money-making time. What you might want to do is plan on doing it maybe like in December. So that way in the downtime months of the year when business is really slow, that's when you would do your recurrent training. So maybe plan on December through February or something like that. Now, remember, your certificate doesn't expire but your aeronautical knowledge does. So you could potentially just let your knowledge lapse, wait till December, right? If you took it, let's say September 1st, hypothetically, and then you could just let it lapse, right? Now you no longer can fly. Well, then let's say December the 1st, you did take it. Well, any time between the end of September, right, until December the 1st, you could not fly. Once you pass that exam, then you could actually go fly December, 2nd, let's say, under your remote pilot certificate. So that's another way you could do it.
Yes, certainly my knowledge has lapsed in so very, very, very many areas. Well, no, that's cool. I'll put links to all that in the bottom, and you can hold tight if you like. You can stay with us, Jonathan. But I know you might have to go. So if you go, cheerio, and I'll speak to you next time if you don't jump in again. Bring into this subject and sort of bringing Chad into the fold as well. Just before I started, and I did say to Jonathan and Louis, I was asked and I responded. Somebody asked me from a safety group what I thought the biggest safety issue was currently in the RPAS world. That's the commercial world as well as the FPV world. Now, I've got my answer I'm going to square away. So I'm going to just go to Chad first for his reaction to that, what he thinks the most dangerous thing is, and then throw it open to the floor and see what else we come up with. G'day, Chad. Thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm hoping your answer isn't Rotor Riot.
Oh, but it was. No, it wasn't. No.
My answer would be ignorance. I think anyone, just going out blindly and doing something and just assuming that it's a toy, I think that is the number one. Now, ignorance takes many, many forms. And I don't think there's really enough data to completely identify that yet, because there have been, really very few drone incidents compared to the amount the industry's growing. So, but that's my answer. I don't know if it's the kind of answer.
It's a good answer. Anyone else care to render an answer?
Self-entitlement. I really don't know. We could just start pointing fingers to DJI with Mavic and Phantom, because these are perhaps the biggest culprits of the expansion of the drone industry. But okay, it's good and bad. So
I thought we agreed if we were pointing fingers that we would only point them at Nicola. I thought that was who we pointed fingers at.
Nicola is the worst culprit of all. He flies very long flights. I'm sure all the 16 sightings of drones in Portugal were from long-range flights from Bulgaria.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Failing to remove the propellers before updating your flight controller, see?
And have you got another answer?
Yeah, Louis, don't forget that these were still, as far as Bulgarians go, line of sight flights.
With your Bulgarian superpowers, yes, that's right. Yeah. Did you have a serious answer there, Brucey?
No, I think it is. It's ignorance. It's just a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge, a lack of awareness, and a lack of appreciation for what can go wrong. When things go wrong, they go wrong quickly. And a lot of people, they've got drones, they fly them. They don't realize that one day it's not going to do what it's told to do. The propeller's going to come off or the motor's going to stop. And this is why we have the rules to stop you flying over crowds of people and things. But a lot of people just don't get it. They've flown their drone for months and it's never had a problem, but one day it will. And they're not thinking ahead. They're not planning for failure. And that's where we end up with problems.
And it's interesting. I said attitude was my so it's a similar sort of a thing. And it's interesting that we all seem to have come along with the same sort of answer. We didn't say manufacturer. Obviously, I forgot to say Rotor Riot, and I am going to amend my email and I'm going to say Rotor Riot. But it is interesting that is basically what we've all come up with.
Honestly, sometimes videos like the ones that Rotor Riot and others do make it look like it's very easy. I know that Chad has a concern on safety on most of his videos, but you go to YouTube and just write drone, and you get lots of videos of guys that don't know what they're doing, show things that are at the minimum dangerous, and that creates a snowball of new users that come and say, oh, I saw that guy on the video and it was so easy, it was so easy, and they go after the "it was so easy" mantra.
All right. Well, let's. Oh, sorry, Chad. But what I wanted to say quickly, then I'll let you in, is perhaps let's park. So we've all seemed to have identified perhaps what a problem is, but let's not move down the line of problems. Let's move down the line of solutions. Because
I'm glad you asked.
Well, obviously, first of all, hang on, I'm going to write it down. Get rid of Rotor Riot.
No,
after we've done that.
The best solution is listening to some folk, some guy down in New Zealand that is constantly announcing new things and claiming for more security. And yes, what Bruce does is valuable to the drone industry regarding safety and concern. And also, Chad, some of the videos, the earlier videos of Chad, sorry, Chad, I've been missing the last few, too many things to see, are also concerned with safety. And I still remember the early days where before everything was done on a drone, everybody used to say, please remove the propellers, please remove the propellers. These days, nobody says remove the propellers, because we assume that we are still dealing with the same audience that we had 2 years ago. But no, we have always new users coming up and don't know the basics that we were telling them 2 years ago.
And safety is one of my top 10 priorities.
No, and yeah, Lewis, that is a very good point. I say about every 6 months we're having kind of a new wave of users coming in. Obviously, it's not a hard set point, but it's kind of what we've noticed in about 2.5 years in the mini quad space. It's about every 6 months you get kind of a new wave of people.
Yeah, and we clearly forget that these guys don't go and look for 2 years old, 5 years old videos, and so they miss lots of the basic principle that we know that we have been here for quite some time. We know that should be never forgotten. It would be better to never forget some principles, but they are, end of the day.
So I think we can agree that education is a bit of the piece that needs to be resolved, and a coalition, a coming together, a meeting of minds, because in America you're facing the UK has current threats and America has threats, and in America it's the loss of 330, potential loss of 336. And I think, Chad, your moves are afoot to try and bring people together. Perhaps you could lead us by the hand through that.
It actually became a bit of a landslide. So thank you, Bruce. Because of your video, I kind of got, well, so what happened was Bruce decided to launch his video about this. And no, I'm seriously thanking you. I think it's great to get people talking. And of course, our Facebook group becomes the launch point for things like this. So if we don't stay on top of it, all our mods have to go to, DEF CON 20 or whatever the highest or lowest. I forget how it works. But I think DEF CON 1's the worst, right? But so we had to be on guard and pay attention. And sure enough, people were griping and starting to get out of hand. So I posted something saying, hey, let's think about what we can do constructively with this. And through that post, I was kind of inadvertently nominated to lead the movement to make things better. So I took it seriously, and I thought, let me take a side jaunt from that story real quick and back up, because it helps to have the context. I think first and foremost, at heart, I'm a filmmaker. And that's, what I've done for the majority of my life and career. And, flight test was that. It was, creating entertainment from my favorite hobby, and then Rotor Riot was an extension of that. And Rotor Riot, even if you go back to the first episode, you'll see it was intended to be a transparent view into this emerging industry. So we could see this new animal, which is a mini quad pilot, and how they interact and what culture is formed and all of that. So I really took more of a, I hesitate saying documentarian point of view, because I interacted and I am part of it, but I wanted it to be as pure and untouched as possible. And that's why, because it was very raw, it upset a lot of people, because they're seeing people do what they do. And so I was always struggling with that integrity of the initial mission. And then, right around the Canada trip, it became a lot more serious. And people were not just saying, but screaming at us that you guys are role models, trendsetters, whatever you want to call it. You have more of a responsibility, than to do what you're doing. And so I took that to heart. And shortly after that, we launched Quad Camp, which is an educational initiative. It's a traveling workshop. And we've changed our content and our approach to it. And we've accepted that role. Now, fast forward to a couple weeks ago, and it's a further extension of that, where, I realized, okay, we've shifted that, we've accepted that responsibility, and we've adjusted our content as such. But now, I think maybe there's more that needs done, and I feel like the AMA has done a great job doing what they do. However, the FPV community doesn't have a proper primary representative when it comes to any kind of government relations, because we're like the stepchild of AMA, and that's no fault of the AMA. I mean, thank you for taking us in, but there was no proper voice for the FPV pilot. So I decided, I was like, I really hoped in the past 2.5 years somebody was going to step up and do that, but nobody had. So again, Bruce's video kind of was the catalyst to make me really question, well, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to keep, directing these videos, or, the guys are pretty much working on their own at this point. I mean, I'm not as needed now as I was 2 years ago. So I do have the time and I do have the drive, and I'm willing to, because this hobby is very, very important to me. And I've seen it change people's lives for the better. So I want to protect that. And so I announced that we were going to create the FPV Freedom Coalition. And currently it's in still kind of it's not really a brainstorming phase. We've settled on the mission statement today, and we have our list of values, and we're working on structure and looking for some legal representation and things of that sort. But yeah, so all thanks to Bruce.
Well, tell us about your values then. What are your values?
Can I before you go with the values? Okay, we have been discussing one community within the drone user base, which is the FPV crowds. What's the percentage of the FPV crowd regarding the rest of the user base of drones? And let's just speak up to the Phantom style drone. How many Mavics? I'm saying Mavics because you all get what I tried to say when I say Mavic as an example, Phantom as an example. How many Mavic and Phantom pilots do we have for each FPV pilot? 10%. The 10%, is it a 10% community of FPV pilots regarding 90% of Mavic and Phantom users? Shouldn't the effort also be geared toward that crowd of that buy off the shelf, don't know what is positive from negative of a battery, is that ground being left by their own means to discover things?
So currently in the U.S., that would fall under the AMA. So I would say you've got the AMA, which is trying to cover all of this, and I'm saying, okay, I know this piece. I'm going to take responsibility for it.
Mm-hmm. But do you have a number, a percentage of the user base that the?
No,
that
I don't have a percentage because all the numbers are changing so rapidly. But I guess I have an idea that the FPV mini quad pilot globally is probably about 300,000.
Mm-hmm.
Louis, isn't Node supposed to be looking after the Phantom and the Mavic flies? Isn't Node Node? You know, the DJI organization.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah, but that's different. Let's say a community-based organization like Rotor Riot and of some sort regarding that user base, because it's being kept a bit neglected. I think so. Okay, but that's.
I would agree. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying the part that I'm willing to take responsibility for is the FPV pilot.
Mm-hmm.
I think
because I'm a Phantom flyer, but
they're much harder to organize because a lot of them are very part-time flies. You know, take it with them on a holiday or might use it, you know, a few weekends in a year. Not like the mini quad flies who tend to be every time the sun shines, you're out there flying. You know, so it's a far more active group than the Phantom flies. So it's easy to represent them because they're more cohesive and they all have a common goal. Phantom flies, they all use machines for different purposes, and so it's harder to get. It's like herding cats. It'd be very difficult to get them all signed up to a group that would represent them, I think.
And they won't see the risk. They won't realize there's any risk or anything might happen to them because they're you know, and I'm sorry, dear DJI user, or other Chinese brands are available, but generally they're not connected at all with the world of model flying and or aviation. So they're just getting out there and flying. Doesn't mean, yes, I agree, they shouldn't be ignored, but other groups need to protect their rights, as do free flight model aircraft flyers, control line flyers, all the different.
The thing is,
and that would be the AMA normally.
If that universe is 90% versus 10% of FPV flyers, if a new rule comes up, then we all take because of those 90%.
And don't forget, so in Simon I'm going to get this wrong. I think it's Simon Wilkinson. Oh, I'm sorry, Simon. I've got your surname wrong. I'm sure I have. In the UK, Simon Dale. He advocated for FPV and got the 1,000-foot height limit that they can use there, and he did that by over several years, proving that it was safe and they could do this. And the CAA in the UK let them go a little bit further, a little bit higher, a little bit further, a little bit higher, and got it there. So that's a really good example of advocating for FPV and it working. And just recently, many DJI flyers have jumped on the bandwagon trying to get under that exemption, which they're not allowing to happen. So yeah, that group, the DJI group, shall we say, do need to think about it and stand up for themselves, and that is Node. But that's kind of not the. Is that what we really want to talk about now? What they should be doing?
No. I was just asking because it's an important part of the entire community that anything that they do wrong will affect us in the end.
But then
that's why we need these smaller groups. That's why we need to have representation for the smaller groups. Yeah, and because we. Like if Chad's organisation is considered to be a community-based organisation, again, it puts the pressure on keeping 336 in place because it's the only way they'll be given the exemptions from the general rules that allow FPV flyers to do the stuff that they want to do, which isn't a risk to other people.
Yeah, and the other piece I want to talk about on that is to be effective, you need a concentrated, collective voice. And to get the mini quad community and the DJI community to have the same voice is not a realistic goal.
That too.
No, it's difficult. Yeah, you wouldn't want to throw them under the bus, but
No.
And yes, there's perhaps the actions of some groups of people are causing problems for everybody else. So those everybody else's do need to come together and have a unified voice. Bruce often says here that it needs to be worldwide, and I think it does. I think worldwide authorities need to be, and Jonathan came with the brilliant start to this, unpacking that the FAA stats are rubbish. So that's what we're up against. We're up against misinformation. And
ideally, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, after you. No.
Ideally, the FPV Freedom Coalition, even if you see the logo, it's a simple little logo with a quad and a globe behind it, because it would be my hope that it eventually could represent that segment globally, not just in the US, because our community is global. Probably 50% of our Facebook group is international. Our customers, a good 30% are international, or 25 or so. So I don't even know where to draw the line, because all of my friends in this community are international. But we're going to start at home. We're going to clean up our own backyard, and hopefully set an example that even if we're not necessarily representing some of these other groups, we can say, hey, these guys did it, and it'll inspire them to do something.
Osby Jones saying perhaps, but we have to acknowledge that it's used for more. I agree with Lou. We need to recognize the reality that they have 90% of the market and decide how to engage. I personally, I don't think they'll be there to engage with. I don't think we'll find them. They're not hanging out in the bars that we hang out in.
Well, it's kind of like, we've all got knives in the kitchen, but we don't join knife clubs or knife groups. Yeah, there are people who have knife clubs and knife groups who are so infatuated with knives, it's their life, it's their life, and they form structures around it. But most of us just use a knife. We want to cut a slice of bread. And that's how most, I think, Phantom and Mavic users are. They just use it when they want to get some video or some footage. They're not interested in becoming part of a greater global community. To them, it's just a tool. They're not as engaged as we are with the passion of the hobby.
You don't tell grandma she's not allowed to own a switchblade.
You never met my grandmothers, did you? Anyway, it's just some equipment to see them saying no. Yeah, it's a thorny issue, but certain special interest groups need to protect 336. If Amazon and Co have their way, will go the way of the dinosaur, and I do worry that the AMA is not jumping up and down enough. So values? Yes, let's just rewind back to what are the values then, Chad?
So, well, here, the mission statement that we settled on is the FPV Freedom Coalition advocates for recreational FPV pilots through education and safety guidelines to protect our access to ample airspace. So that's the mission statement. So maybe I should stop there first. Any questions?
Yeah, that's the mission statement for the members. Are you going to include anything that makes it a more worthy organization from a public perspective? Remember, we've got to get the public on side. Is it to protect public safety as well, or something? Are you interested in engaging that way, so that the media looks at it with glowing praise rather than, oh, it's just a little group trying to circumvent the rules? How much weight you're going to give to getting the media and everyone else on side with you, or are you just going to be a lobbying group for the members?
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the tone of our approach, because a mission statement for me is the filter. So when we are trying to make difficult decisions, we can always go back to the mission statement and say, hey, how does this react when we run it through the mission statement? And oftentimes that it just becomes a filter that makes hard decisions a lot easier. And that's how I use the mission statement typically. Now, as far as the public, it's going to be visual, it's going to be stories. We're going to share the culture with the public, because that's the important piece when it comes to the public. Safety often is the thing that people throw at things they don't know about. So if they're scared about something, they make it a concern that it's illegal or unsafe or whatever. Yeah, it's going to be a complex thing to chew on, but I think we'll get through it eventually. Who knows? 2 years, 5 years, 10. But
because the way I look at it, the media has vilified us. Everyone that has a drone is evil, and they're trying to spy on us and bring down airliners. And I would think that the perspective I would look at is we need to get the public on our side and show them we're working for them to preserve the safety, of drone use, and we're as much helping the public as we're helping our members. And then perhaps they will take a kinder view of us rather than just a group that are looking out for their own interests. You may not put that in the mission statement, but I think it should become an important part of the whole raison d'etre of the organization, because nobody is out there lobbying the media for us. We're just victims of the media, and so it needs to be an important key role of an organization like this.
It is absolutely at the heart of what I plan on doing. And this is so hard to say out of context because it sounds very disconnected, but I assure you it's not. I cannot tell you the amount of emails and personal messages I've gotten where people say this hobby saved their lives. And I don't know why, but it is, it's more of an artistic crowd than the more traditional, coming from Flight Test, going to Rotor Riot, it's more like technicians, artists, and the artists are way more, emotional, I've noticed there is a lot of people that have been attracted to mini quads, and I think that out of body experience, that have been dealing with depression. There's even, war veterans that have helped them get over, or not get over, but deal with PTSD. So there is a mental health component to this that people are unaware of. And I think we need to share those stories. There is no lack of abundance of those stories. So I think that's one small piece. But then when you start talking about future jobs, I did just come across some statistics where they were projecting what they think the future jobs will be in drones. And it was a ridiculous amount of money per segment, per industry. And I think the mini quad hobby is the gateway drug to all of that. So, you get into mini quads, and then you get into electronics, you get into flight, you get into virtual reality. There's a lot of things that it leads into, that I've seen people switch their careers, and so Bruce, all of that to say you're dead on. It's not explicit in our mission statement, but it's absolutely going to be the approach once you see the website build out.
And you're talking about mini quads and multi-rows. What about fixed wing? Because you're building yourself as an FPV representative thing, and there are a lot of people who fly fixed wing FPV. How do they fit into your composition?
Yeah, I would say that they would be equally represented. I just think it's probably about, I would say how it feels. I don't have accurate numbers, but it feels 10 to 20% of FPV is fixed wing.
Yeah.
So
I think you're probably right. In the comments, Zoltan makes a very good point, and it's one that we've mentioned before, that the FPV issue is easily controlled by creating more enthusiastic clubs. And that's one of the things that Bruce says is once you show somebody, once you put the goggles on somebody, and then they'll get it. Until then, they don't get it. That's a very good point, I think.
Absolutely. So
one thing I've been
the immersion.
Oh, go on, Louis. Go, man.
No, I was just referring the FPV stuff is the factor of being immersed on a scene that you could not otherwise be in it, either by the high Gs that it commands, or the different approach of something that you've seen millions of times and now see it from a different perspective.
Yeah, I've been talking to the spinal injury unit and trying to get to put on a demonstration for them. So people who are confined to a wheelchair, for example, for them, this has got to be an even more mind-blowing experience than an able-bodied person. Someone who can't even walk, able to fly, the out-of-body experience. I can see that's going to be a really big thing. If we can align ourselves with providing a resource for people like that can change their lives, that's going to be a huge positive PR step for the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
It will only be a positive PR stick if it is correctly deployed, because you get a random news article somewhere in the world that does not get the same coverage as the drone nearby the approachway of an airport. That has to be something that the big moguls of YouTube media, like we have one here present, or two, sorry, the two moguls of YouTube media, that have to promote that and give it the right kind of promotion. I'm talking to you, Bruce, and I'm talking to you, Chad.
It's interesting. Zoe's situation has gathered a lot of media coverage. I've seen quite a few pieces on Zoe and what FPV did for her. And I think that, as Chad was saying, that's sort of like, it is a great example of how this hobby can change people's lives for the better. And thinking about it, Chad's right. There are a lot of people I know who have really pulled themselves out of a hole once they've discovered FPV. And these are things we should be leveraging to our advantage.
It's not working for you yet, though, is it? But anyway, no.
I'm a lost cause.
Yeah.
Chad, just a question. Do you think that the media that we are, the media that we are using, namely YouTube, is not perhaps the most appropriate one to make the message pass to the big media outlets? So, because these big media outlets have constant feeds on Twitter, and most of the news I see on a Twitter stream come up not the same day, but 2 or 3 days afterwards to the big news outlets. And could it be a problem with the medium that we're using, YouTube?
I don't know. I think YouTube is the tool that I know best, and then Facebook and Instagram. I'm embarrassed to say I still don't get Twitter. Like, I get how it works, I understand it, I know how to use it. I just don't get why it's so popular. So
no, the important thing here is not how it is so popular, is the media outlets have constant tabs on what's happening on Twitter. So that can be a way to reach out and amplify even further anything we say.
Well, I think it's so I don't think it's the platform as much as the content, because a lot of the news that we talk about, especially like in the mini quad or FPV space, it's not really relevant to the mainstream person. The things that we get excited about are, they don't even understand, so they don't even know how to write a story about it because they don't know how it relates to people.
That's why we have Chads.
But we're already like SCS News. My word, SCS News. We're already niche, and so FPV is niche.
Right.
It's as far as the big world goes. The big world out there only understands the scary stuff, really. So what do you need? What do you need to happen now? I see in the comments also Tyler said it would be cool if the USA and Canada. Well, I think Canada can be involved, Tyler, but we'll let Jan answer that. Really, what do you need from our dear viewers, and what next? What's happening?
Well, right now we just have just from a couple of small mentions on Facebook. I had created a Discord channel, and there's a Facebook group called the FPV Freedom Coalition, and there's also FPV. fc.com. You can go there. It'll take you I think to the Facebook group, or it might take you straight to Discord, actually. So if you want to get involved early on the conversation, right now we're setting up, we're kind of constructing the design of committees, and what segments or sectors we need to speak to. And honestly, I'm just kind of jumping into this head first and saying, how can we make the biggest difference? But realistically, we're not trying to rule the world. We're saying, hey, at the bare minimum, if we get no funding and it's just a group of people talking about this, at the bare minimum, we can create educational materials to help people understand. Because the number one thing I've noticed is people, here's a good example. It's unrelated, but it's relevant and it's current. The U.S. has new tariffs, tax from China, other countries, and people are freaking out about what that means. But nobody's actually going to the documents and reading how it's actually going to impact them, because the documents are 1,000 pages long. But if you take half a day and you just go and you read the documents, you can start to figure it out and get an image of what's going on. But instead, what people do is somebody posts something, and then 100 other people take that as fact and then form their opinion on that, and then it just gets out of control. Well, it's the same thing in the drone space or FPV or whatever it might be. So one thing that we can do is take FPV, and we can create educational materials that when somebody says something about 336 or something about a law, we can say, no, this is a law, that's not a law. This is a mandate, that's not. We can help simplify it so it's like a little qualified cheat sheet of here's what I need to know to fly. And it sounds simple, but the problem is, you might say, well, why don't you do that today? Well, because it's changing so rapidly that you only want to do it and stamp it with the approval if you know that you can keep up with it. Because once you have that trust and people are trusting you to have that information, you have to make sure you're on top of it. And that's what we're building is a team to make sure that we can do that.
Well, that's coming all the way back around to Louis' original sort of suggestion that, and then you saying that you think there's churn of 6 months and 2-year-old videos people aren't seeing. So that is an interesting thing, and it also rather speaks to a community-based organization, because part of the grift for a community-based organization is training materials and having a curriculum, if you will, for this very thing. So it's a big task. It's a big hill in front of you, and I'm sure you'll climb it very well. And you need the foot soldiers really to join the Facebook group, join the Discord, and get the shovels out. Trying to think of some metaphors. Bruce is good at metaphors. Have you got any tea-based metaphors that will cover this one, Bruce?
I never metaphor I didn't like, but
you see.
The only thing that I was thinking is, this sounds a bit like a guerrilla group, the Freedom Coalition, and I'm wondering if that's going to get some people's backs up in the halls of power. These just like young rebels with their bloody drones. I'm wondering if it shouldn't be like an institute instead,
Institute.
Yeah,
it's got some shade to it, doesn't it? So the first person view aeronautical institute or something.
FPV coalition. No, FPV.
No,
come on, blockchain, AI.
Blockchain, AI. Yeah, needs some Bruce chain. Yes, got to have blockchain.
Yeah. Have you got 3D renderings there?
3D renders. The word freedom did worry me a little bit. That's quite a powerful word,
and
with an expectation of something.
Yeah. Chad Corvera. I can see it now. T-shirts with Chad Corvera on it.
How does it relate with those guys' Freedom Drones? Couldn't be confusing with the Freedom Drones guys? Those
you mean the Freedom class?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if do they even have a working model currently?
I believe they do.
Yeah, didn't they change their name? Isn't that the old group?
Well, there's extra class now, but that's not as big.
But I think the really big ones changed their names. I think there was a fallout with that, if I remember rightly. I don't think it's called Free. Funny enough, Chris Ballard was going to be on this today, but he's changed the job. So he's on his first day of his new job. So welcome to your new job, Chris. And you shouldn't be watching this if you are. So what I was going to say. So I think that's changed. But no, but just the word freedom, it's a bit, isn't it a bit? Or is it not a bit?
Bit revolutionary,
I don't know,
like
but,
Venezuela.
If people are, if the hair stands up a little bit, good. I mean,
okay.
My methodology.
I can honestly say I don't have that problem.
Right. No, my methodology has always been a slow, steady pressure. Just be focused on what you want to accomplish, and you just keep pressing in that direction, and it will succeed.
Well, something's always better than nothing, that's for sure. You can't, and the status quo at the moment isn't doing all avenues of aero modeling in the US any favors at all. So something has got to be done, and that is very much changing and rolling out into the rest of the world. The UK is facing a comment period for something that looks Some of the proposals, like age limit of 18, is just ridiculous. So that has
happening in Australia. Have you seen the Australian parliamentary recommendations to CASA?
It's been mentioned in comments, but I haven't actually seen that.
That's a disaster. They want every craft to have. I think I've got it on screen here. So one of the requests is that where is it? An airworthy standards are produced for every category of thing, and that
license plate on every vehicle. Yeah, thank you, Bruce. We have that.
The committee recommends that the Department of Infrastructure, Regional Development and Cities, in cooperation with Civil Aviation Authority, develop appropriate airworthiness standards for remotely piloted aircraft of all sizes and operations. At a minimum, fail-safe functions such as return to home and safe landing functionality and forced flight termination should be mandated on every craft.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because in the UK, they're actually saying the opposite. They want them to get rid of autonomous flight capabilities and return to home. Yes. Yes.
Don't worry, Bruce. That is the first version. We had that about a year ago, and then it changed. That was the first version here too. So don't worry. They're just doing the same.
There's politicians telling the regulators how they should be doing their job. That never works.
Look, we've got 4 minutes to go to the top of the hour. I've got to mention the elephant in the room. Sorry, Chad, if I'm cutting you off a bit there. So please rant at me if you have more that you want to say about what you want to say. The elephant in the room. Venezuela.
The two elephants.
Two elephants. Yes, there's one over
what
here.
happened to Venezuela?
Venezuela, true or false? What do we think? Did that really happen?
It's a setup. It's a giant. It's silly. It's obviously staged. In fact, did you notice when that drone blew up? It was awfully much like someone firing a high velocity bullet through a couple of 6S large capacity lipos. It was rather than high explosive. It didn't have. If someone actually, 2 people emailed me saying that they work with explosives and that was not a high explosive charge. It was a much lower explosive charge. And it could well have been just a bullet passing through a couple of lipos.
And it's impossible because, come on, having an M600 with only 1 kilo payloads. Oh, come on! The guys could do better. They could get 4 or 5 kilos on an M600. That would be nice.
But I can't work out why they don't make assassinating the president a crime in Venezuela. Obviously, you're allowed to do it, but they're gonna probably. I've seen the headlines all over the world media now. You know, countries must prepare for drone attacks. Blah blah blah. And all this proved was that drones are a really inefficient way of trying to kill someone.
Yeah, I believe they need some FPV capabilities. They need some FPV capabilities.
Well, hang on a minute. I believe we could get very much struck off YouTube if we discuss the hows. So let's not go down that road, shall we? Let's just. I must admit, when I saw that first one, I thought one of 2 things. I thought, number A, I wondered if that video is even anywhere near there because there were no buildings in that first clip underneath. And number B, I thought, I wonder if that was the lipos just letting go. And that's what I thought.
And for the M600, the lipos are very small, so and they're 6, so you have to get some very precision 6 shots simultaneous. Questionable.
And of course, ISIS have been doing this for years. So for this to come into the public domain now, as it were, and the words first attached to it.
We've seen the Syria incidents, the Gaza Strip incidents. We've seen all of these. So just some more free publicity for Venezuela, Maduro.
And degenerate.
It's not good for the tourist authority, though, is it? It's not really. I mean, if you're the Venezuelan Tourist Board, it's not really your.
Do they have tourists in Venezuela? I mean, would you go to Venezuela? I mean, free petrol, but apart from that, you know, was it 200,000 or 20,000 times more for an egg than it cost for a gallon of petrol or something? It's crazy, but it's the inflation rate. You arrive there with a fistful of money and it's worthless.
Come on, Bruce. You cannot drive to town. You cannot drive to town on an egg, but you can drive on petrol.
Go to work.
The interesting thing is that there's already cries for, and did you notice all the press releases from the anti-UAS technology people? You get out. All suddenly the feeds were littered with, you know, our technology will prevent these drone attacks, blah 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 blah. And it's kind of crazy because you'd think that if someone was going to try and kill somebody or kill people, I don't think stricter drone regulations would stop them, but merely from the fact that they're conspiring to kill people shows they have somewhat of a contempt for the law. So I don't think FAA or CAA or CASA regulations are going to make the slightest bit of difference to whether they go ahead and kill somebody. It's dreaming if you think that's going to change anything.
Yeah, that's. But well, let's go to the other elephant in the room. The new drone from Unique, the Mavic competitor.
I have not seen this yet.
The Mantis Q.
I've not seen it either. It's not a very big elephant.
News to me.
Come on, it's the Mavic. Come on. We've said so many naughty things about Mavics here today. Come on, now Mavic is not alone. They have a cousin from Unique.
I really genuinely don't know what you're talking about.
I found it here.
Unique Mantis Q.
Oh, I'm gonna look right now.
Come on, guys. Your guys are on the business on the business side of news.
I have my Mavic Air.
Oh, here it is, Mantis Q. All right, so 12 hours ago. Well, what do we think about it then? As I look at this desperately, quickly.
Too little, too late.
How much is it?
Yeah,
I've heard of 500.
4.99 to 5.99 euros.
Yep.
I don't know.
Well, yes. What do we? Yeah, I mean, that's interesting that you said how much is it, Chad? Is that your first reaction to any of these things? Then always is that.
Always.
Do you think that's the only thing that matters actually?
Well, it's not the only thing, but it's the gatekeeper. So here's what happens: people see something, they're like, "That's cool. How much is it, and who uses it?"
Yep.
And if it hits the right price point in their mind, and the right people use it, then they go to the next level.
So does Casey Neistat have one?
No, I think the question there is, has he crashed one yet? Isn't it?
Or has he lost one?
Oh, lost one. One or the other. Look, guys, we've gone to. It's only 2 minutes over the hour. That's not too bad.
And then we have the third elephant in the room, but it's for later.
It's a packed room. Yeah.
Come on, you're the guy that is in Africa, Gary. So you must have lots of elephants in the backyard. So the third elephant in the room is the new announcement of DJI's rescheduled to the end of this month.
That's because the Unique was coming out.
Probably,
yeah. Well, there was other. What was that other Unique? I thought the other Unique was the actual Mavic Walloper. Can't remember the name of it now. There was another one.
The age something. That's one of the problems of Unique. They come up with names that no one remembers.
So Drone Camps RC did a review on. He called it the He called it the Mavic Air clone. Let me see, but I don't know what it's. Oh, it's the X12. I don't know who makes it, but it's super cheap. It's like $36, and but it's not really a clone.
We've seen those from Banggood, Chad, for $30-40. That have the same shell, but even smaller than a Mavic or a Mavic Air.
Richard has it.
People are.
Sorry, Nicola, go ahead.
No.
It's a special guest appearance from the late Dr. Richard Hawkins.
The collision avoidance in those cheap Banggood ones consists of not being able to fly far enough to hit anything.
Come on. Why do you need collision avoidance on a drone that collapses itself if it goes against something?
There are affiliate links in the description of this video if you want to buy one, by the way.
Thanks, Bruce.
Craftwork, yeah, that's right. Richard has it. It was the Autel Evo Craftwork. I like that as well. The Autel Evo, that's what I meant, not the other Unique. That is, Richard's got it. He's reading my mind there.
Don't forget the new Parrot.
Yeah, we have the Parrot 2 that just came out, and has unique feature. Oh, did I say unique? No, as a distinctive feature. The Parrot has a distinctive. We cannot say unique because it might be confused with the unique drone, which is the gimbal pointing up. That's perhaps the most.
It's great for filming A380s on takeoff.
Oh gosh, all the chestnuts are coming out now. A 33-minute flight time, Zoltan reckons. That's quite a thing. But what's everyone going to bring out for Christmas? It's a weird time. Well, no, I suppose no. We're going. September's around the corner, isn't it? I suppose we are getting into the window for Christmas drones, but it's certainly not going to be all that much, I don't think, this year. Right. So with that, was there anything else that anyone else saw this week that they would like to bonsai? Oh yeah, hang on.
I just saw it behind you.
Yeah.
Is yours as old as mine?
Probably, yeah. And it's as Bruce says, they're not the best fly, but I got a slope just here, so if I feel the need to unwind from my busy executive day.
The bonsai glides like a small windowless building.
No, but you can't destroy it.
That's true.
They'll glide if it's windy enough. They'll glide. And August now is our berg wind season, and it is windy here now. So
you guys know the trick. You take like Shugu or E6000 and naphtha, and you thin it down, and you paint it over the surface.
Oh, if you inlay a piece of 4 mil by 1 mil carbon, sort of flatways into the leading edge of the wing right along, then the nose won't break and bend.
Nice.
Funny enough, Nicola, let's just testing 1 2 3. Can you hear me, Nicola? Over.
Yeah, I can.
Oh, that's better. You're here now, because Ryback in the comments has just said, "How about Tridge announcement day that RG Pilot 390 with Chibios imported to many flight controllers, including Beta Flight and Clean Flight?" Well, funny enough, I happen to know that you have got also an omnibus up and running with that build. Maybe you could tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think the version that got installed is not the latest as of today, because as far as seen, they release a new version pretty much every day. But I think I got the 3.10.0 and flew it on Friday, and it was just perfect. Everything I tried, missions, return to home, auto tune, fly-by-wire A, manual, naturally. Everything worked perfectly, and the OSD, I don't know what it is about it, but it just looks better than the Beta Flight one. Even though it's the same chip, the same board, it just looks better. They do, some items are still missing from that, and I really would prefer to have a graphics interface for setting up that OSD rather than to have the whole video system running so I can rearrange the stuff. But I'm guessing at some point that might happen. But even so, I think there are a few tiny little bugs that could be worked out. But overall, it's, I saw the reliability and usability of the audio plane. Well, in particular, the audio plane code I know and have used for so many years, and there was, surprisingly none fail safes, random disarms mid-flight. No, like there used to be that issue with INAV when you do a long banking turn and you let go of the sticks, the plane would stay banked. You had to basically yank it the other way or wait for a bit so it would right itself. But the audio plane code seems to be working properly and has been as long as I can remember. So as far as I'm concerned, and what I tested last Friday, that thing works.
And are you going to be putting a video up on your channel when you're back from your holiday, ArxangelRC?
Yeah, I'm coming back home on Thursday, and I'm gonna bust my ass to try and get that video out by Friday.
Can I ask you something, Nikolai? Because it's something that we like to have on the ardupilot.org forum. is how did you set up? Why did you set up the things like you did? And then show the final result, because that's what our user base wants to see.
Well, if you've seen any of my videos, you know that basically that's how I structure them. And
yeah, I know.
Having put the omnibus on the Phoenix V2 glider, naturally I went for the lightest build possible, because I really don't want to weigh that glider down. And in fact, the boards itself, I added a power distribution board so I can filter the video system power supply and not have to deal with additional regulators, because that literally adds the least amount of cables. I think boards and cables for the whole autopilot, including the FPV system, is not more than 40 grams, which, including GPS, telemetry, everything, the camera and the wiring to the back of the plane, because I actually have that camera installed on the rudder, which gives an outstanding view of the plane, and it is mesmerizing to fly that way while seeing the whole plane in view and still seeing the ground and just seeing where you're going, seeing what the control surfaces are doing. It's just hypnotizing.
Yeah,
And
but Nikolai, what I was asking was more of the configuration on that you do for the flight controller, not only the hardware part of it, but also why did you configure things the way you do on Mission, either on Mission Planner or Q Ground Control?
I use Mission Planner because a few years ago there was no Q Ground Control, and basically got used to that, and I'm still using it because it's just much more convenient. Honestly, I've tried using Q Ground Control for a few times, and I just feel lost in that thing. I just don't get it. But there's nothing really different apart from the OSD parameters to separate it from a standard APM or Pixel controller. It's just the same thing on a much cheaper board that has actually the OSD and the current sensor in it, so saves up a lot of space, weight, and wiring.
Absolutely. Now, of course, because you've got in the glider, are you gonna be trying Ardusaw? You've got to try Ardusaw. You'll like that.
Yeah, you did tell me about this a while back. I'm probably going to need to read up about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's take a bit of
like it.
It's like magic when it works. It's like magic when it goes off and autonomously soars by itself.
Actually, I think the thrill of soaring is to do it yourself, not for the autopilot to do it.
Now, Bruce, you and Bruce are going to gang up on me now. Yeah.
No.
See what Gary spends so much time on the flight simulator.
I do.
It's easy for you to do something. Just fly one with the Ardusaw running and fly one manually and see which one of the two gets better.
I did fly manually. I spent all of last Friday flying the damn plane, and it was just perfect. And it was a windy day. It was not a day I would normally do a maiden flight on. And surprisingly, the plane, even before the auto-tune, handled exceptionally well. And there was not a doubt in my mind that this thing was gonna make it, and it was really stable in the air, much more so after the auto-tune. At some point I just let it run a mission on its own and chased it with the Phantom, although the Phantom did have some trouble coping up with the wind, but we'll have to repeat that on a Como day. But I did a lot of soaring that day, not automatically, fly-by-wire, sometimes with flaps, sometimes without flaps, and the time just goes by and you don't even notice it.
It is fun. I know. I must admit, gliding is the thing I enjoy the most. But it's also thrilling to see it happening autonomously. But with nonsense from me and a very timely update of somebody flying with one of those new boards, I will ask again: did anyone else see anything else that they would like to talk about this week? Again once, again twice. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Chad, thank you very, very much indeed for taking time out to join us. All the best with your efforts, and if we can help in any way, then of course we will. And I will put the links in the description below when we've finished. and hopefully we can drive some more traffic your way and get some clever thinking going into the FAA rather than fear-based thinking.
Well, thank you guys for allowing me to come on and share a little bit of news. And you know, I look at it as a kind of a slow roll till, you know, we get things solidified a little more. But anyone that wants to participate early, send them on over. Will
do. Bruce, what have you got on the build table there, Brucey? Where's the balloon video? Come on, get the balloon video out.
You know that wind you're talking about?
Yeah.
I do.
I see you get the wet version there.
Yeah. There's been a couple of fine days, but very little that's been totally wind-free. So I'm sitting twiddling my thumbs in that respect. But I have been doing a lot of whiteboard stuff, which is needed at the moment. So more theory and science stuff to keep people busy.
Brilliant. I look forward to that. And Louis, what's in your
oh my God, my busy week is more flying around the hugest wind turbines we've ever seen. 6 megawatts monsters that are 200 meters high. Those would be good for the Rotor Riot guys to fly around. I believe they would not have enough battery to go up and then come down naturally.
No, coming down is easy.
Yeah, but under control.
Absolutely.
And those are some very, very challenging systems, and work-related issues have been taking all my time this last week.
Okay, and Nicola, well, you must have enjoyed the rest of your holiday. I hope it goes very well with the family there, and safe journey home when it is time for you to go.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, when I get back, the Nano Talon with the Mini Fix in it is up for flight, and you know, having to work with something that doesn't have an OSD and a current sense was a pain.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah. A big bunch of, you know, a big ball of wires.
Yeah. Well, yes, that's the thing we all want to eliminate, isn't it, really? All right, well, with that then, dear viewer, hopefully you have a lovely rest of the week. If you're flying on the weekend, have fun. Look after yourselves. Don't forget to join us 2100 GMT next Tuesday for similar nonsense. I bid you all a farewell. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
And fly safe.
Thank you.
Fly safe indeed. Bye.